In April 1983, filming began on the pilot episode of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. At the time, it seemed like the pilot episode was lost to the sands of time, though little teases here and there came out over the years to say that some of the pilot footage had not only been used, but the pilot itself was still in the archives of Mattel. None of us really thought that we were going to see a full cut of the pilot episodes in the public eye for a very long time. Well, my friends, on the 9th of May 2025, we finally saw that footage. This is something that a lot of the fans were not expecting, myself included. And when it was announced that the pilot episode had not only been found, but reconstructed using the previously unseen test film elements and was going to be released, the entire world, I'm not just talking Thomas and Friends fandom or Railway Series fandom, I mean the entire world got hold of this story. Ian McHugh was doing interviews like nobody's business. This is something that is a monumental milestone in terms of the Thomas and Friends fandom. Everybody has seen it, everybody has their opinions on it. And of course, me having a Thomas and Friends channel and being a Thomas and Friends fan, I have to do a video on this pilot. Before I jump into this, I'm going to say that all of the thoughts I'm going to express are my own opinion. Your thoughts will probably be different than mine. And it's the one thing that makes the Thomas fandom so unique. And let me know in the comments how you felt when the Down the Mine pilot was finally released. All I ask is that you be respectful, and above all, enjoy the video. Okay, let's dive in. So let's talk a little bit more about the pilot. I've mentioned this in my Season 1 ranking video, but there was a pilot filmed of the episode Down the Mine, which was presented to TV executives, essentially like a pitch deck for what the series could produce if it was given the green light. ITV in turn then gave the series the green light, and in 1984, the first season of Thomas and Friends was released. But they completely reshot Down the Mine. They didn't use the pilot footage, or at least that's what we thought at the time. Over the years, we thought that the pilot was lost to obscurity, but little breadcrumbs started to be placed to make the fans realise that at least some of the elements of the pilot had survived. There's a scene where Thomas is puffing past Knapford, which was confirmed as being taken from the pilot episode. Later on, there was rumours that shots of the Fat Controller were also from the pilot episode, as he looked different in certain shots than his incarnation that is used throughout all of Season 1. Not something that the casual Thomas and Friends viewer would notice, or something that a casual viewer would notice in general. But Thomas fans aren't casual viewers, and they picked up on this. And over the years, murmurs were going around that, in fact, the pilot footage was in Mattel's archives, but we didn't know what was going on with it, why it wasn't being released to the public, because the fans crave Thomas content, and this little piece of history would be something that everybody would jump on. Ian McHugh, who worked on Thomas and Friends during the time of the Brenner era, had said that if there was a possibility to get the Down the Mine pilot ready for audience viewing by the time of the 80th anniversary of the Railway series, that he would get it out. A pretty bold promise made to the fans, but the fans had trust in Ian McHugh specifically to get this done. So behind the scenes, restoration of this pilot had begun. Little teases here and there, or the odd image drop, showed that the pilot was in existence and the fans were craving it. Then on the 9th of May 2025, we got word that this pilot was ready and raring to go. It had been reconstructed, been painstakingly worked on to get it up to 4K standard. The original VO of Ringo Starr's test pilot was found, but there was no incidental music, which is something that the original Thomas and Friends series was known for, and it's still known for to this day. So Ian McHugh contacted original series co-composer Mike O'Donnell and asked him to record a special score for this Down the Mine pilot, which he graciously accepted. Word of this lost pilot spread around the world. It was reported in main news outlets. The first time Thomas has really been reported in news media outlets in the world in a positive light in a very long time. And with those interviews, fan anticipation grew. And at 6 PM British Standard Time on the 9th of May 2025, we got it. The Down the Mine pilot was released. It was dropped on the Thomas and Friends YouTube channel. Normal people, I say with inverted commas, would think, why is it a big deal that they dropped it on YouTube? Most likely platform to do it. And you're right, but because of the significance of this pilot, and because of Mattel's previous shaky track record with the franchise from the 70th anniversary to the 80th, them just dropping this on the Thomas and Friends YouTube channel, especially with all of the copyright issues that had been going on with YouTube throughout the years, was a monumentous thing. It was readily available for the public to digest. And boy, did we have more than a feast on this. Everybody was absolutely blown away by this Down the Mine pilot. I myself, like everybody else, watched this pilot when it went out. I was a little bit later because I wanted to watch it with my family. I got to watch it with my kids and my wife. They're not avid Thomas and Friends fans, you all know that, but they knew how important this was to me. And because it was such a special moment for me, the fandom as a whole, my wife in particular understood the significance of it and begrudgingly embraced it for me. And getting to have that experience with my family is something that money can't buy. I mentioned when I did the Project Tiger Moth video that getting to see live action Thomas that was at a TV series scale and watch it with my kids was a memory I was going to cherish forever. And I did not think it could be topped, but it was topped because this is authentic Thomas and Friends content with the original Ringo Starr narration, Mike O'Donnell compositions. I was genuinely speechless when I watched it. Since then, I have watched it, let's just say we're probably into the hundreds now, and I've watched a plethora of Thomas fan content on the Down the Mine pilot. A lot of them are saying that it's better than the actual final product that was put out for season 1. Bold claims, but you can see why they would think it. So I'm going to break down some of the points from this Down the Mine pilot which I think made it surpass the final cut that was released in season 1. I'm going to be pretty meticulous with it because trying to go, I like this bit, for this type of video, it just doesn't feel right. I have to go through the episode chronologically, talk about how it compares to the final cut, what I liked about it, but I want to specify before I get into this, I love both versions. I love the pilot and I love the final cut. This is the time capsule of all time capsules for Thomas and Friends fans. So it's something that deserves more care looked into it. So I'm going to try and do that and try and give this Down the Mine pilot the respect that it deserves. And as always, we'll start at the start. Now, when they're showing all the behind the scenes footage of this pilot being filmed, interspersed with the backstory around the pilot, I think was a perfect way to start this video. It fills in casual fans about the significance of this episode. It shows some of the work that went into the pilot episode specifically, and how that much love and care and dedication was going into a pilot episode. It would show the studios that they were really going to up the ante when it came to the finished product of Thomas and Friends season 1. There was no guarantee that season 1 was going to be a smash hit. The fact that they were greenlit for 26 episodes just shows that the quality of this pilot must have been really, really strong. So showing the behind the scenes footage and showing how everything came about and giving that little explanation for the casual fan was something really nice. It gave the casual fan a hook, a reason to watch this pilot. And Mike O'Donnell's updated Thomas theme that was playing throughout it, absolutely fantastic. I messaged Mr. O'Donnell to let him know that I thought he'd done a fantastic job, but I will be singing his praises throughout this, as I will with every part of this pilot. I particularly like the bit when Gordon is coming along with his line of trucks and you just see the little hand pushing at the back. I think that was quite a nice nod for some of the goofs that you saw in season 1, particularly the infamous crash of the Flying Kipper where you see the hand at the back of the train. I know that it's probably not an intentional Easter egg, but for me it felt like a nice little Easter egg for the little teething problems that they would have been working out during the show. I think it was just fantastic. It brought this smile to my face. And when it comes up, Down the Mine, the pilot episode told by Ringo Starr, that's something that just blew everybody's minds. The fact that we were getting an unheard Ringo Starr narration of a Thomas and Friends episode. After all this time, the last time that we had a Ringo Starr narration for the series, not counting any like charity appearances, children in need appearances, anything like that, was in 1986. Almost 40 years without hearing an original Ringo Starr narration. It's mind-blowing for the fans of Thomas and Friends. Now, the opening shot of Thomas at Lower Tidmouth, and then the shots where Gordon's coming in with the trucks, hands down better than the final cut. The final cut, you just have one camera angle. You see Thomas straight on and Gordon coming into the station. In the shot before Gordon comes in, you're seeing like a workman working on Thomas's wheels. You see that Thomas is separate from Annie and Clarabelle. Even the guy reading the newspaper on the bench. It's little details like this that you never saw in the final cut. It's something that's just so special. And then when you see Gordon shuffling in with the trucks, the different camera angle there, and it cutting to a shot of Annie, and then back to the face-on shot of Thomas. Just those little 3 camera angles just add so much more depth and so much more quality to the scene. Overall, the scene plays out roughly the same as the final cut from there. Aside from a couple of different parts of narration, and I got to talk about Gordon's resin face. When I first saw that face, me and my kids just burst out laughing. Because it's so different to the type of Gordon face that we are used to seeing. It was jarring, but in a good way. It was so charming to see. But the rest of the scene plays out pretty much the same as it does in the final cut. But there are some different camera angles, like when Thomas gets buffered up to Annie Clarabelle and then leaves the station. They just add to the uniqueness of this episode. And then you have final cut footage of Thomas puffing down his branch line, and then it takes another turn. Because we don't see the part where Thomas is dropping off Annie and Clarabelle at Knapford. We just see a still image that just says Knapford, which I think was quite nice because for a test pilot that's being presented to people, it establishes that we are in a new location on the island of Sodor. And then we see that pilot footage of Thomas puffing by Knapford, confirming what we already knew. This was original pilot footage that made it to the final cut. And then we get to the actual mine scene itself. This is where I think that the final cut has a slight advantage. Just because they had more time to really create a proper mine scene. They were able to add a lot more detail, a lot more intricacies to it. So for a finalized product for your average viewer, it looked better. But this pilot mine scene has such a unique charm to it. You're going to hear me say charm a lot because it's charming. That's just what it is. I love the camera angle of Thomas puffing past the danger ahead sign. That nice low camera angle is something that becomes prominent in the series, really establishing the grandness of the engines and making them look bigger than they actually are. We get some additional things thrown in, like we see shots of the driver and the fireman that never made it to finalized cut. These were little bits that were left out. They weren't even adapted into a final cut. And then you have the mine scene itself, where the ground underneath the rails, it starts to fall away as Thomas is going straight for the mine and crashes. I think that was done better in the pilot episode than it was done in the final cut. In the final cut, the hole was already there. It's already done, it's already established that this ground has gave way. So getting to see this, of how they would have been able to work this into an episode for the ground coming away from underneath the rails, is a very unique selling point for this pilot episode to make it stand on its own. And then we see the shots of the Fat Controller and his two stooges, as I'll call them. Again, for the casual viewer, this won't seem like anything, but the way that the Fat Controller looks confirms that those images from the final cut that we thought were pilot images was true. And the scene where Gordon pulls Thomas out of the mine, I think was done better than the final cut as well. In the final cut, we see him get attached to Thomas. The Fat Controller says, "Are you ready? Heave." And then essentially Gordon just pulls Thomas out of the hole. Using the different camera angles that they use in the pilot, where we get to see Gordon's wheels slipping as he's trying to pull Thomas out of the mine, combined with Mike O'Donnell's score and the different camera angles that were used, all those little things add more drama and suspense to the episode. There wasn't as much drama when you watch it in the final cut. The only way you could tell that it really was hard work for Gordon to get Thomas out of the mine was because he had a different resin face where it looked like he was struggling to pull him out. And once again, while I'm on the resin face, that one resin face of Gordon just happy smiley throughout the entire scene. Even when he's saying that he's in disgrace and he feels very low, but he's got this big cheesy grin on his face. That's basically symbolic of chronic depression. Looking at it from someone with severe mental health issues, when I suffer from depression, a lot of the time, my words will say that I feel sad. But I've been preconditioned through years and years of social training to still have a smile on my face when I'm doing it. So I burst out laughing at this when my family didn't when they watched it, because they didn't get what was going on in my crazy brain when I watched it. He's going, I'm in disgrace. I feel very low. And then you're also seeing Thomas with his smiley face going, I'm in disgrace too. It's like if I meet someone else who's really struggling with their mental health, but we're not comfortable enough with each other to actually tell each other we're struggling. Yeah, we're struggling, but look how happy we look. So no one else can tell that we're struggling. And the part where Gordon talks about forming the alliance and Thomas has to ask what that was, and Gordon explains it. An alliance. United we stand, together we fall. It was cut and paste verbiage from the Down the Mine story from the Gordon the Big Engine Railway series book. And then when it goes to the buffer to buffer, the Allies puffed home, is a great way to end the pilot. Now I'm gonna be controversial here, guys, because I praised the pilot throughout this, but I prefer how they shot it in the final cut. The way they filmed that scene where you're looking at it from inside the mine. You're in the mine looking out at these two engines very slowly puffing away together. They formed this alliance. They're agreeing that they're going to help each other. And then you have the slow build of the ending score. I think the final cut is better than how this one ends in the pilot. And of course, the end credit sequence where we have Mike O'Donnell's Thomas theme. They're showing images from the Railway series book that it's based on, and then the matching images from the pilot. And they do this, I think, 3 times. Then you see the Mattel logo and that final part at the end. Memory of Brett Allcroft. I'm not going to lie, I had a tear in my eye when I saw that. But this is the one thing that I'm going to say on the pilot. You guys are probably going to think that I'm being dickish with this. It's just my opinion. We all know Brett Allcroft passed away in 2024. We also know that the 40th anniversary of the Thomas and Friends show was last year. Why didn't they bring it out for the 40th anniversary of the TV series rather than the 80th anniversary of the Railway series? I already know the answer. An 80th anniversary is a much bigger milestone to celebrate than a 40th. If you hear 40th anniversary, you're still impressed. But then you hear 80th anniversary, you think, wow, that's legacy, that's longevity. So from a marketing standpoint, I totally understand why they brought it out on the 80th anniversary. They've done the right thing on that for Mattel, for the reach that it probably would have got, for the audience it would have attracted, for the clicks it would have achieved. But it's the anniversary of the Railway series, and they're bringing out footage from the Thomas and Friends show. It should have been out to celebrate 40 years of the TV series of Thomas and Friends. And because they're doing this muddying the waters with how they're marketing it, people are getting confused. The casual audience member is looking at this and thinking it's been 80 years that the TV series has been on. Yes, when they're reporting it, they're saying it's been 40 years since Thomas first aired on our TV screens, which was based on the Railway series books, which were released 80 years ago. They're saying that in the news reports because they're getting their facts correct. But it's like an asterisk is being put on it. My kids, when they watched this, genuinely thought it was 80 years since the TV show first came out. And when I was trying to explain to them what I've tried to explain to you, they weren't comprehending, they weren't understanding. And getting more children in is the whole point of this. I know they're trying to appeal for the older audiences as well, but they also want to try and bring in the next generation of Thomas fans. They've said that in their interviews. And the point that I'm making around Brett Allcroft, if they released it on the 40th anniversary, she would have seen it before she died. Because this is also something that's for her legacy. We all know, as Thomas fans, how much Brett Allcroft did for this franchise. We are all so indebted to Brett for what she done to get Thomas and Friends onto our screens. But when it's presented in the media, it's like she's a footnote. And I really hated that. She was mentioned by Ian McHugh, rightfully so, but the media just seemed to brush it off as just a, yeah, sad she died. Anyway, let's move on. That's not something that Brett deserves. And I'll make my stand on that. I hated seeing that. If this was brought out in the 40th anniversary, she would have saw it before she died. She would have seen the outpouring of love from the fans that this is rightfully getting, and it would have been something nice for her. But I don't want to get too hung up on that. Yes, it was upsetting to see, and hindsight is always 2020. But I don't want this to take away from this monumental achievement that we got for the franchise. This is something we never thought we would see. This is something that the fans genuinely used to talk about and say, do you think they'll ever do it? No, probably not. But it's been done. We got it. We finally got it. And we can watch it anytime we want. It's absolutely amazing that this has happened at all. You know that I am not exactly the biggest fans of Mattel. But on this occasion, I've got to give them their props. Just as much as I would slate them when they do something wrong, I got to give them props for what they've done here. They made the right call, they had something right by the fans, and they're reaping the rewards from it. So my final thoughts on the Down the Mine pilot. This, pardon the pun, is a runaway success. The pilot, I think, is better than the final cut. I love them both, and I understand why they wouldn't have put this pilot out as the final cut. They made so many changes to the show, they made so many changes to the characters. Like the resin faces for Gordon is the prime example of why this wouldn't have made the final cut. Looking at Gordon's wheels and his wheel slip, they changed all of that to make him look more accurate in the final cut. So having the continuous run of episodes throughout the season and then having this one put in as the pilot as part of that catalogue would have been jarring for fans to see. So I understand why they had to reshoot it and they had to do the final cut that they did, because this episode is closer to the end of the series than the start. Because we all know when we watch TV shows, when a pilot episode is done, it's the first episode of a season, and then you build off of that. But getting to watch this pilot, seeing how well they done restoring it, hearing the original Ringo Starr voiceover, the new music from Mike O'Donnell that was composed for it, which is absolutely fantastic and really takes you back and gives you that 1980s feel, but also with a contemporary twist. The direction of the pilot, the little behind the scenes images at the start to hook viewers in. This is just a work of art. This is a true celebration of what Thomas and Friends and the Railway series as a whole was all about. So I sign off by saying, thank you Ian McHugh for keeping your promise. Thank you Mike O'Donnell for composing another great score. Thank you to Brett Allcroft for giving us everything that we've had over the last 40 plus years. Thank you to David Mitten for your superb direction. Thank you to Mattel for actually having the balls to release this. And the final thank you goes to the Reverend W. Audrey, his son Christopher, and the entire Railway series book catalogue. Because without you, we wouldn't have this. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, keep on chucking.